Campus Library. We are pleased to present Tammy Davis with us tonight. But first I want to tell you, because I always make the joke that we work on commission, that you can get a library card here at the UAS Ketchikan Campus Library, whether you're a student or not. You just bring us an Alaska ID and a piece of mail or something that shows you have a current active mailing address. And then you can borrow books from us, and you can borrow over 3 million other books from other libraries across Alaska. So it's really an amazing system. It's free to you, and we encourage you to come and join the club. So Tammy Davis has been the Invasive Species Program Coordinator for ADF&G for the past 15 years. During her tenure, she has participated on national, regional, and statewide advisory and invasive species planning teams, including holding a board seat on the Alaska Invasive Species Partnership. She collaborates with diverse partners to prevent, detect, and manage aquatic invasive species. ADF&G hosts 2 options for receiving invasive species reports. I'm sure you're going to be talking about that. The online invasive species report and a telephone hotline 1-877-INVASIV. And we will post this information on our Facebook page after the presentation. Reports are investigated by the ADF&G staff and partners whenever possible. Tammy Davis has partnered with Smithsonian Environmental Research Center to study control options for the invasive colonial tunicate. I didn't practice this, Tammy. Didium?
You can just say DVEX.
DVEX in Marine Harbor in Sitka. So welcome, Tammy Davis. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you all on this rainy, blustery evening. So, yeah, I'm here to talk about European green crab, which unfortunately are in your neighborhood. So you got a little hint with my introduction. We're going to do a little interactive quiz right off the bat to get everybody's minds firing. So my question is, which of these species are invasive in Alaska? Is there a pointer on here?
Pointer.
Yeah. So we're going to start with this. This is the DVEX. So, hint, hint. This is a colonial tunicate, and it is this globular, shiny organism here that is established on this bottle. Do you think that's an aquatic invasive species in Alaska? Yes. It is. It is established in Whiting Harbor in Sitka. Whiting Harbor is adjacent to the airport. When you land, you guys probably land coming this way. It's on your left. If you're coming from Juneau, it's on your right. It's a man-made bay that was created during World War II, and we think that the tunicate was introduced on aquaculture equipment and infrastructure. Okay, common goldfish. Established in Alaska as an invasive species? Yes, you're right, it is. The most notable population of goldfish occurred in Anchorage in an urban pond, Cuddy Pond. They were breeding. This is the largest one we found. It's almost as big as a woman's extra tough boots. So we used a rotenone, which is a pesticide, to get rid of those goldfish. What about the signal crayfish? Yes, correct. So signal crayfish, you can tell it's a signal crayfish. They've got this white or bluish. This one's a little more bluish than white. Signal right at the apex of their claw. And they were introduced into the Buskin River drainage on Kodiak Island. And the Shunak tribe of Kodiak is doing some research to understand their dietary preferences by doing stable isotopes on their gut contents. The concern with signal crayfish is that they will prey upon salmon eggs. It's a really high nutrient food source. And that's one of the main subsistence fisheries on Kodiak Island, sockeye run in the Buskin. And then what about this, northern pike? Everywhere in Alaska? No. Good to see some no's, right. This is also a little bit of a trick question. Northern pike are native to most of Alaska, north of the Alaska Range. So in the interior around Fairbanks, in fact, we have some populations that are managed because they are declining. But around South Central and Kenai Peninsula, they were introduced in the 1950s into the Yetna River drainage, and then high water events allowed them to spread into the Susitna, again on the Kenai Peninsula. We have been pretty successful eradicating those from the, not pretty, we have been successful thus far, eradicating them from waters on the Kenai Peninsula. Several of those systems are still under surveillance to make sure that we got all the pike out. Okay, then we're gonna go, oops, I gave that one away. Zebra mussels, if anybody is from the Midwest, you've heard of zebra mussels. They were introduced into the Mississippi River. They're a very serious concern to Alaska. Fish and Wildlife Service has watercraft inspection stations at the border so that watercraft coming from outside are inspected, and if any mussels are found, they're decontaminated with hot pressurized water. We have had boats arrive at the border with mussels on them. Luckily, they were dead. And then finally, what about this guy, green shore crab?
That's what they look like, right?
This guy, yes, is oh, where'd my, there we go, is not invasive. That's a native shore crab. Okay, so we're here to talk about green crab, not those other aquatic invasive species. Before we started our presentation today, I mentioned that a gravid female of female carrying eggs was found in Tamgus Harbor on Annette Islands Reserve just today, first one. These are kind of a nice example of European green crab, Carcinus manus. This one shows the 5 spines, the 3 bumps between the eyes, 5 spines on the outside of the eyes. But it also gives you an idea of the different coloration. So although they're commonly called green crab, they have a wide variety of colorations. So this guy's pretty yellow with some blue tips on his legs. This one is orange. Orange crabs tend to be adults and those that have spent some time in fresh water. Okay, so let's talk about why green crabs are a problem. A, they're here. While Fish and Game and our Natural Resource Management partners have known that green crab could arrive to Alaska, it was still shocking last year when we found out that they had arrived. I'll talk about that a little bit more. The main concern is that green crab are very aggressive and they're territorial, which means they can cause shifts in native crab use of the nearshore environment. And then as they're searching for food, so they like a lot of the benthic invertebrates that live in the muck of the nearshore and in eelgrass. And eelgrass is really important for nursery habitat for salmonids and other species that we rely on for food and economic resources. And so they can eat up to 22 clams in a day, which doesn't maybe sound like that much, but over a short period of time that can decimate a clam bed. And if you like to eat clams, that should be a concern. So this is what I'm going to talk about tonight: how to identify green crab, why they're successful invaders, their distribution in their native range as well as along the West Coast. We're going to mostly focus on that West Coast population. Pathways for introduction, types of habitat where green crab are most likely to be found and be able to establish. And then how you can help. Even if you just walk your beach, find a crab that looks 5'3", 5'5", you report it. That's information that will help us make management decisions. And then talk about some of the other stuff that we're doing. Okay, so here we are. This is a carapace. This is one of the first green crab carapaces or shells that was found at Metlakatla. So before they found live crabs, they found these carapaces. And again, here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 spines. This is where the eye would be. 3 bumps, rostral bumps between the eyes. Again, this is the eye cavity, and then 5 spines. So the 5-3-5 is our way to remember green crabs. No native crabs have that same orientation, and no native green crabs have, no native crabs have 5 spines on either side of the eyes. Okay, the color doesn't quite pop here, but this is a very orange crab. This you can see is very yellow on the ventral side. This is a yellow on the dorsal side. Again, 3 rostral bumps, 5 marginal teeth. They're not larger than 4 inches, so they're pretty small. They're bigger than our purple and green shore crabs, but they're, that big across. So if you find a crab that's this big, not a green crab. So for identification, yep, 4 inches across, and that's at the widest point of the shell, right? So at the 5th spine across the back. 5 distinct spines. So again, this I mentioned earlier, green crabs can be a wide variety of colors, and especially as they move through their life cycle, they can be yellow, they can be green, they can be grayish, blackish, orange. And then, unlike some of our, like Dungeness have 2 claws that are about the same size, they have 1 crusher and 1 grasper. And that kind of makes them able to be really aggressive with their crusher and dig like crazy in the benthos. So these are just some of the native crabs that you might run into, the hairy helmet crab. I have gotten several reports of that as a green crab. This is a graceful rock crab. Similar to the red rock crab, these have more indentation in the spines, and they're not quite as deep red, not quite as fan-shaped as the red rock crab. This is a dungy. I imagine most of you could identify a dungy if you saw it. Dungies get a lot bigger than a green crab does. And then these are our purple and green shore crabs, which if you do any activities in the shoreline, you run into a lot of those. So this is a map of the native range, which is here, northwestern Africa and Europe, which is why it's called a European green crab, right? And they're just a standard shore crab, just like our green shore crab. They're a standard shore crab in their native range. And then the red areas are where it has successfully been introduced, which is surprising considering this is their native range. But noting that there are established populations down here gives you a glimpse into why they're considered one of the 100 most invasive species by the IUCN, because they have such a wide tolerance, particularly for temperature, ocean temperatures. The difference between here and here is pretty broad. The researchers have modeled what the expected or projected areas of establishment might be, how far they could expand from these known populations. And as you can see, a lot of coastal Alaska, so southeast, up into Prince William Sound, all the way around the chain and up into Norton Sound. So this is why they're invasive, because they can handle it. They can handle a wide range of water temperature. They prefer to be here on the warmer end compared to, this is one of our native dungees. Yeah, so 95, they can spend short periods of time in 95-degree Fahrenheit water. Larvae, on the other hand, are not quite as temperature tolerant as adults. They need between 50 and 70, 80 degree water temperature in order to survive, settle out, and then establish and molt through their life cycle. 63 is kind of like the sweet spot for juveniles. So that's water temperature. 50 degrees. So, you know, they maybe have a hard time in the winter in Alaska, but July, August, September, especially down here, you know, those are pretty common temperatures. Water salinity, again, a wide range from 5 parts per thousand to 50 parts per thousand. And females tend to choose protected areas near fresh water when they're ready to disperse their eggs. The thinking is that they use the currents, especially on the high tide, to flush their eggs out to spread their genetic material. And then the nearshore, they tend to be in the intertidal, that's where we expect to see them, but during cold winter months, they do go deeper into the subtidal. And for all of these examples, they behave slightly differently in all the areas where they have been introduced. Slightly differently on the Atlantic coast where they've been for 2 centuries, slightly different in California and Oregon and Washington where they're established. And then they tend to be in low flow, low energy, not a lot of wave action. They really like estuaries. But we just learned this weekend that on Haida Gwaii, they are using pretty high energy coastal areas and just kind of using protection of rocks and other debris along the shore. Okay, so green crab were first introduced to San Francisco Bay, down here. And it's believed that that introduction occurred as sort of a hitchhiking event in seaweed that was used as packing material in the live food trade. So if lobsters were shipped over to San Francisco Bay, they might use seaweed in the packing material, and some green crabs got in there. They dumped the seaweed into the bay, green crabs. And then they kind of slowly marched up the coast, mostly northward. And again, that's probably because of water temperature restrictions. Since the late 90s, early 2000s, they were, slowly making their way up this western coast of Vancouver Island, British Columbia. And then unusually, in 2010, they had an introduction, again, human-mediated. This all we expect to have been just larval transport in the ocean currents. So eggs are released into the ocean. These eggs can last 82 to 90 days. You can travel a long way in that amount of time. And then they started to be established here in the 2018 period down here in the Salish Sea. And then in the late 2000s, green crab were found up here, 2018, in Haida Gwaii. What we've learned from the Metlakatla populations is that based on their genetics, there were at least 2 different pulses some that match the Haida Gwaii population, same genetic structure, and others that are related more to this grouping down here. Most of the green crab on the whole west coast are pretty genetically similar, which indicates that there haven't been a whole lot of introductions from the east coast. Okay, so this is the ocean current, right? So we know that especially during El Nino years, ocean temperatures are warmer and there tends to be a little more activity moving up here through the Alaska current, moving up through here. So this is Vancouver Island, right on up. So we know there are populations down here. We know there are populations out here. And then just travel right up into the Alexander Archipelago. There's some thought that green crab can also be distributed when, especially cargo ships, larger vessels, discharge ballast water. They use ballast water to stay upright when they're traveling. Based on the genetics, that's probably not the most common way that green crab have spread along the west coast. We know that sea surface temperatures are warming, causing all sorts of problems, but creating a better environment for green crab to establish and survive. And again, just kind of looking at, this is just a snapshot, September 6, 2022, how currents move. This is the Net Islands Reserve, so, you know, this is Haida Gwaii, there's a population here, boom, 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 right up into there. Okay, so we saw that map of the projected distribution. We learned in the early 2000s that Alaska was probably suitable, and if there was even a 2-degree increase in ocean temperature, then yes, definitely suitable habitat. So working with NOAA, National Marine Fisheries, they developed a habitat suitability model. So okay, if green crab are going to arrive, where would we expect them to show up? Habitat suitability model helps you target in on, okay, they like salt marsh habitat. We can look in salt marsh habitat. Because we have such a huge coastline in Alaska, it just helps us cue in on the various habitats that are most at risk. And then we worked with Smithsonian Environmental Research Center and Portland State to develop a green crab response plan. So going back to the suitable habitat, we know that muddy, sandy, pebble habitat is suitable. They like a little bit of protection. Eelgrass, as we talked about earlier, is critical habitat for native species in Alaska, and particularly because we care so much about salmon, that's nursery habitat for juvenile salmon. They like a little bit of wave protection from wave exposure, and again, they like a little bit of fresh water input. And boy, we were in Tamgas Harbor yesterday as part of this training event that we did, and it looks pretty similar to that.
That was it.
Yeah, it's not. Yeah, so this is a picture of a green crab predating on a clam here. That's one of the concerns. So mussels, clams, oysters, any of those species that we like to eat, but also that other species rely on, whether it's shorebirds or fish, sort of like the lower food chain items. Okay, so in July 2022, Metlakatla and NOAA were kind of reviewing their early detection monitoring effort. Metlakatla had been involved in early detection monitoring for a couple years. NOAA went over. They had some new signs that they were posting. And so they were just checking out the various areas where they had been doing some early detection monitoring, including this new sign. And they did what we're calling a beach walk volt survey, which is just walking along the beach where either the high tide line or the rack line or both, or even up into the vegetation that's slightly above the shore. That's where these were found. They found these carapaces, and boy, were we all shocked. And Metlakatla has done an incredible job since July. They have been trapping. They trapped through November of 2022, and then the weather kind of got crappy, and they stopped for the winter, and then they've been trapping again since late March. They pulled out almost 800 crabs out of Tammy Davis Harbor. And so they're using fukui traps, which I have one back on the table back there. That's also the kind of trap that we're using by our early detection monitors. And the traps are set. They're good at catching particularly adult crabs. Metlakatla is also using a shrimp trap. And while that's not part of our early detection monitoring, they are effective. And since they're beyond early detection, they know they're there, they're just trying to get them out of there. So it's a slightly different approach to managing green crab. So I talked about this a little bit. These are some of the negative impacts that have been experienced where they've been established other places. On the West Coast, on the East Coast, the softshell clam industry was a viable fishery for a good number of individuals. That pretty much got wiped out. There's still a very small softshell clam industry, but it's pretty much dead. Blue mussels are pretty important to our coastal ecosystems, and if they were to wipe them out, it would have some drastic impacts. While 0.84 million maybe doesn't seem like a big number today, that's based on 2004 research. I imagine that number, if the same analysis was done today, would be a larger number. Okay, so this is what Fish and Game has been up to. So we learned about Annette Islands finding green crab. I'm in the division of sport fish at Fish and Game. I work with the division of comfish staff, and we were able to, in the fall, set traps here in Bostwick Inlet, and then down here in Foggy Bay. We didn't find any green crab. I still don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. If they're there, I want to find them. I'm glad they're not there. I hope we didn't find them if they aren't there. And so what we're using is GIS-based mapping layers to help us look at our coastline and those habitat attributes that are considered suitable habitat for green crab. So the semi-protected estuary, protected estuary, and though you can't see it here, there are some green dashed lines here, and that is indicative of eelgrass beds. So this is Bostwick Inlet, so this is all really good habitat. And we set traps here and here and down over here. There's freshwater influence here, obviously freshwater here. We didn't get any green crab. This is beautiful habitat, and if you're from the area, if you go out for dungeons, you've probably gone in there for dungeons. And then, so Bostwick is proximal to, near to Annette Islands Reserve. We were trying to target areas based on nearness to that known population. And then Foggy Bay is down near the border, which we're thinking if larvae are moving up the coast from Haida Gwaii, This might be also really great habitat. This is Berry Inlet. And again, you can't see this very well, I'm sorry. But we've got eelgrass, protected estuary, semi-protected estuary. And so, again, using those same parameters, we've looked in here, and then down out here. We were setting our traps in lovely eelgrass nursery area, no green crabs. So that's a good thing. So that's what Fish and Game is doing. The other thing that I'm working on is increasing the number of volunteers that we have. For example, RK just did our workshop here in Ketchikan and over in Metlakatla this past weekend. People who are setting traps monthly on the low tide because they live there, because they care about that particular area. I am one person. I am the Invasive Species Program for Fish and Game, so I can't be everywhere. And because I have a limited budget, I have to rely on the goodness of commercial fisheries down here in Ketchikan and sport fisheries down here in Ketchikan. So we're doing the best we can with what we have. But our community-based early detection monitors are really, really valuable. This is a program that we started in 2007. If you know Gary Freitag, he was one of our early monitors, and he monitored from 2007 until he retired. Last year, I think, right? Yeah. Some of these places have been doing, Ketchikan, they're pretty new to the system. Sitka has been around a long time. Valdez has been doing it since 2007. So we're happy to have some new areas, Cake, Kasan, Heidelberg, Dalby. So we're going to have more eyes and boots on the ground. So that's setting traps. That's, a bigger investment of time and effort. Traps get set at the low tide of the month. They soak for 24 hours. You come back, you collect data on anything that you find in your 5 traps. A less intensive way that you can participate is by doing these moat walk surveys. We have a new data sheet that is much more appealing than this one. But basically what you're looking for is any of the crabs that you observe on your walk. And the protocol for the moat walk is to have 20-person minutes. So if I go out by myself, I'm going to walk for 20 minutes. And I might walk this way and that way and up there and over there. And in that 20-minute time, I'm going to jot down every type of crab carapace that I see. If I go with a buddy, we're going to go 10 minutes each. So it's a total of 20-person minutes. I can give you a lot more information if you're interested. These carapaces are a good indicator that you have molting green crab in the ocean. And maybe you don't see them, but they're probably established. Talking with partners on the West Coast in DC and Washington, their assessment is if you're finding carapaces, you've got green crabs. So we would love to know if you've got green crabs in your area. So this is a little bit more about the trapping protocol. So again, this is eelgrass here. We've got a fukui trap. We've got a bait bucket here. These look like red rock crabs. We got a lot of those last year. And I'd be happy to share more information with you if you're interested. So then we have 2 ways that you can report invasive species, green crab or any other organism. I think this might be invasive. I'd rather get a report of something that is native to Alaska than not get a report of a species that you think might be invasive. If you go to our website and type in invasive species, and then go to our report in invasive species, you can report any of these things, even if you're like, I don't even know what this is, but I've never seen it, and I have been walking this beach for 30 years. Report it. Let's find out what it is. We do hope that you collect a GPS, which you can do pretty easily. If you snap a picture and you've got your location, services on your phone, it'll give you a GPS for where you were. We like to have a picture of what the organism looks like in the habitat where you found it, just so we can kind of, you know, if it's tricky to ID, it gives us an idea of at least where it lives. Get a good picture of any characteristics that will help us identify it. And then if you see a lot of them, take a picture of an individual and then take a picture of all of the organisms that you see. There is a little tricky situation here. In 2021, after 5 years, Board of Fish adopted regulations that created a banned invasive species list. And it's very conservative. You can't possess, transport, buy, sell, import, export. You can't do anything with the species that are listed as banned invasive species. Green crab are listed as a banned invasive species, which means you can't collect it. You can take a picture, but you can't collect it. This is in part because we don't want people moving things around, right? We don't want you taking something from here and then being like, oh, I think this is probably native, and then releasing it there. But also, I get reports of what people think might be green crabs, but they're not green crabs. So we don't want wanton killing of native crabs or other species. We did, at our March Board of Fisheries meeting, it's a statewide meeting, we did request a change to those regulations that would allow someone to collect, kill, put that organism in a, in an zip, you know, like a Ziploc or a closed container, and then take it to Department of Fish and Game to get it ID'd. That way, even if it's a native species and you've killed it, it's only one rather than a bunch. Those will go into effect when the Lieutenant Governor signs them into law, which we expect will be about July. Okay, so this is some of the other stuff I've been busy with, raising awareness. We've got new posters. Unfortunately, I don't have any more. If you are interested in putting a poster at your business, or if you have a dock nearby and you want to post up a poster, please let me know. I will get one to you. I will get you 5. I'll get you 20 if you want to post 20. And really, we're just trying to get people to key in on that 535 characteristics. So raising awareness, the more people know, the more they're apt to report something that looks unusual. Getting more people involved in our early detection monitoring. So working with Alaska Sea Grant, NOAA, Metlakatla Indian Community, Sea Tour. I don't know if you work with that organization. If you do anything with aquaculture, they sample shellfish for PSP. We have 30 people come to the workshop from southern southeast, which is really cool. People are interested in green crab. You know, ultimately, we all are trying to protect the resources that are important to us, the fish and shellfish that we rely on for food and possibly our income. And then trying to improve our detection capabilities because we have such a huge coastline. It's really hard. If we have limited opportunity and limited capacity, we want to make our efforts count. And so trying to figure out what sort of information can we learn about the overlay of larval drift. You know, what sort of pathways do the larvae from Haida Gwaii and BC, do they drift? You know, are there particular areas where they tend to move based on the currents? Just trying to get a handle on that. Those are things we don't know. There's not a lot of data for currents in the Alexander Archipelago. We've been doing a lot of work in the Gulf of Alaska, but not so much up in the inside passage. And then Fish and Wildlife Service got some funding to do a rapid response drill in the event that green crab were to arrive. We got the funding before the green crab were found. So while today it seems like the cart is before the horse, but that wasn't the intention. So we'll be doing a drill in August, and that's really just trying to get all partners who have any jurisdiction in within Alaska for coastal areas like National Park Service, NOAA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Fish and Game, Department of Natural Resources, etc. Get everyone together and really plan, like, if we have high value areas, critical habitat areas, we can work together and trap the hell out of those crabs to reduce the population enough that they aren't over the threshold and they're not able to have really significant impacts on our native species. With that, I want to thank Metlakatla Indian Community. They've been a great partner. They are really doing everything they can. Pacific States Marine Fisheries Commission has provided some funding to help with our training and outreach materials and some supplies. We work with Washington Sea Grant, Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. Washington Sea Grant came up for our training, and Emily Grayson is just a huge asset to Alaska, and she's just brilliant. And then, yeah, those are our other partners. So I will answer any questions you might have. I'll keep that up there in case you want to keep my number, get my email or my number.
There's no questions online, but I'm going to turn the light up.
Okay.
Yeah, what ocean depth do these things live at?
Pretty shallow. So they're in the near shore. And so for our monitoring protocol, we say set traps at the -1 foot mean low, low water. It's possible they're even more shallow than that. It was pretty shallow where we were seeing them in Metlakatla.
And Haida Gwaii is pretty infested?
Haida Gwaii has green crab. Yeah, they pulled a lot of green crab out of there. Yeah.
Can you go over the DNA matching with the ones from Haida Gwaii again? I know you mentioned it briefly, but did you also do testing on the crabs that were found here?
Yeah, so it was the crabs that were found here that were tested. There's a woman at Woods Hole Oceanographic Institute, which is on the East Coast, but she's looking at the genetics of all the green crab on the West Coast. And working with a wide variety of individuals who are either trying to reduce populations or just trying to learn more about green crab.
So where did ours come from?
It looks like Haida Gwaii and Washington, but BC and Washington basically have the same genetic structure. Yeah, so hard to say.
And you think it's more from the drift of the currents and not from cruise ship ballast?
Yeah, cruise ships don't actually distribute that much ballast water.
Okay.
I know. I live in Juneau, so we get a lot of ships too, but they don't have a lot of ballast water.
Do you know if they're looking at mitochondrial, or did they see? They don't sequence for an entire genome on the green crab, do they? Do you want me to like get back?
I can put you in touch with someone who knows that.
Cool.
Yeah, and she's got several papers out. So
Yeah.
yeah, I'll get you those publications.
So was I understanding maybe in July, they might kind of make it so the restriction isn't quite in place so much so that if people find them, they can kill them? Like right now, you're saying if you find them, don't kill them. Because there's so much confusion about what is it. I mean, not all green crabs are European green crabs.
Right.
And so the advice right now, the regulation right now is that if you find one, take pictures of the location and leave them alone.
Yes.
So that we're not accidentally killing hundreds of crabs that happen to be green but are not green crabs. So in July, when that restriction is loosened, is it gonna be that the recommendation's gonna change?
You can collect one.
Right, so that still not, like, go out and just kill them and find them. Collect one and bring that, okay.
Yep,
Yeah.
yeah, and contact me.
Right.
And then we would love to have you join us if we're gonna do an eradication of any kind. I'm not gonna call it eradication, but
Yeah.
control effort.
So I was at this, workshop, picture, one of the things that I do is I take pictures of different things I see during the day, flowers, birds, whatever, and I post it on Facebook, because I posted a picture of green crab and said, these are bad, this is how you identify them. If you see one, take a picture and send in, don't kill it. And it had a lot of reactions. People were like, what do you mean I should not?
Don't doubt it.
Kill them all. And so I've been reiterating, the reasons I just stated. And people are like not wanting to not kill them because they're bad, you should kill them. And so I'm guessing you're finding that a hard sell with people.
It's a hard sell. We're not the only ones that do that. Washington has the same regulations. BC has the same
And I
regulations.
totally understand, the reason behind it, and I agree, is that the only thing worse than green crabs killing everything is having us help the green crabs kill everything out of
Right.
good intention.
Yes.
But, people don't understand that, I don't think. They are well-meaning, and so you just cross your fingers and hope for the best, I guess.
Yes, I have the good fortune of talking with a lot of people.
Yeah.
Not all of them are happy.
Right, yeah. So in July, you will be able to collect one to send in, but still no wholesale killing of whatever they think might be green crab. Okay, thank you.
Yes,
Yeah.
and again, my experience and the experience of my colleagues in BC and Washington is that 90% of the things that get reported as a green crab are not a green crab.
From my experience, it's like helping people like learn different, yes, there's so much still to learn that people don't know.
Yeah, and it's not
And that's
a,
okay.
yeah, it's exactly, it's not, I would rather get a report of a native species every day than get
Yeah.
a green crab report every day,
Yeah.
right?
What eats them?
Well, if they move into adults, Dungeness and Red Rock habitat or territory, they would eat them. They're a lot bigger, especially Red Rocks.
Do otter and mink, like have you noticed them, were you catching them? Like any signs of their carcasses or whatever being eaten by?
Yeah,
Marine
so
mammals?
we had, Tom Terrio is a researcher down with Division of Fisheries in Ocean Canada on the west coast of Vancouver Island. And he said that he has seen otter predate on green crab, but, and actually I spoke with a gentleman who's a graduate student working on otters. He said they go for the biggest bang for their buck. So if they're gonna have a choice of a 4-inch green crab or a fat juicy dungy, they're gonna go for the dungy. They're not necessarily in the same area, and so they might be like, oh, I'll eat some green crab here, and as I float out into deeper water, I'll get that juicy. But if they go the opposite direction, they might not be hungry anymore, and so they're not gonna eat the green crab. We don't really know.
If there are already crab there, native crab, what is it about these things? Like these are just hyperactive crabs, they eat more of it or something?
They're very aggressive. So they're territorial and aggressive. And so like there's a period when they overlap with juvenile Dungeness. That's concerning because they'll kill and eat juvenile Dungeness. They're really aggressive. I've read that Carcinus manus, which is their scientific name, means raving mad crab. So, and you know, that's from where they're native, so, yeah. And, you know, nobody has asked this yet, but, can you eat them? Yeah, right. You can. They're 4 inches. Their legs are pretty small. There's not a lot of meat on them. They're not a crab that in their native habitat or in their native distribution, people choose to eat them. On the East Coast, they've been trying to establish a fishery and you know, consumption of green crabs so they can reduce populations, right? That's, we all can probably think of an example, like if people like to eat them, we're really good at reducing numbers. So what they're doing on the East Coast is they use them for stock and whiskey, which I tried and kind of tastes like cod whiskey. Like if
They
you
use it for what in whiskey?
like broth, stock, fish stock.
Whiskey?
No, you don't mix them together, but somebody who has all kinds of really quirky whiskeys, really green crab whiskey.
What part, where on the East Coast, because I'm from North Carolina, and I have not heard of them, we have a home there. We teach school here, but we go there in the summer.
Mm-hmm.
And I have not heard of the East on the coast of North.
They're probably not as far south as North Carolina.
Okay.
Yeah, they're more like, New Jersey, Maine, New Hampshire, yep, up that way.
It sounds like they would decimate
The
crab
blue crab?
population there, especially the soft shell crabs that we have.
Yeah, so thanks for mentioning that. There also is on the East Coast, they're trying to foster a soft shell crab fishery
Okay.
because they taste
They're
good.
delicious.
Well, the green crabs,
Oh,
right?
oh.
So but it's a really short window of time, which I don't know that about.
Yeah, there's a very short amount of time where they molt,
Yeah.
and then that's where we get those crabs. And the blue crabs are the ones that we eat, they're about this big. So it sounds like maybe the green crab would be like a tapas, you could just, one bite, you would have it.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, or 5.
Why do you think they haven't gone as far south on these? Because you showed the native habitat.
Yeah,
It included a great big chunk of the north coast of Africa,
yes.
which I would say was fairly warm, maybe? You're getting down towards the equator. How come they haven't spread down to Florida and places like that? I wonder, does anybody know, have any idea why?
So one thing I've read is, temperature is, especially warm ocean temperature controls them moving down. Yet, a population was introduced, down to southern, Australia, southern South
I noticed
America.
that there's another area that's fairly warm.
Mhm.
Yeah, you're getting
Although it's-
snow
it does get
speak
cooler.
of.
Yeah, I think it's an ocean temp, and it probably has to do with, I'll be right there, the duration of warm water. So if it's a short duration, they can probably manage. Might not be good for them, they're not holding on, they're not robust populations, but they can hang on.
You know what a barracuda is? Have you ever seen one, a real barracuda?
Yeah,
Yeah, I used to catch them, the ones on the Pacific side, maybe this big, although look out, they will attack a diver. Anything shiny, they'll bite you anyway, and they can bite. But the ones on the East Coast are really dangerous. They're like sharks. They're 6 foot or better. They're twice as big for some reason. I wonder, this is just a wild theory. Are they controlling them, and that's why they're not getting to the south? A big barracuda maybe getting in there and figuring out?
it's possible, I don't know that.
We can only hope.
Yeah, I was just curious about that map too, that projects them, because I've noticed there's a lot of blank spots on there, and a lot of the red spots seem to be where there's a lot of shipping terminals, like you look at South Africa, Australia, here, and South America, looks like Argentina has one there. But they're not in the Gulf of Mexico, they're not, like on the East Coast in certain areas, I mean in the southern portions.
But like southern South America, gets pretty cold.
Yeah.
You know, think Patagonia, right?
Yeah.
So while it gets warm also, not for long periods of time, there's also cooler water.
So I was wondering though, is a lot of the blank spots like, do you think it has anything to do with like maybe there's not enough people checking for them there? Because it seems like there's a lot of red spots where there's big populations of people.
Sure, definitely.
And I
Data
noticed-
is only as good as there are people collecting it.
Okay, because I also noticed too, Quebec didn't have any, like the St. Lawrence, it didn't have any up there, and I was, maybe the water's too cold, or maybe the Ketchikan are eating them.
I'm not aware of that. One thing that's interesting is, so the Atlantic population on the east side of North America kind of expanded, and then based on genetics, there was another introduction into Newfoundland, and that population, they think is tied to northern Scandinavia, like Norway, and is more cold tolerant, and so they moved up further north. It doesn't look like it, but the fear is that if that strain of green crab gets introduced to Alaska, that's where we would potentially see them out as far as north and sound. I've spoken with people who do modeling, and they're like, yeah, we should probably redo that model. That model was done in 2007. A lot more information is known about green crabs. It's one of the most highly studied crabs globally.
So they're not in Asia, right? Or are they? Like, are they in Russia?
You know, no, but that is part of their projected range.
Okay.
I did read something recently about Japan, but it was a slightly different species. So, and I have to admit, my focus has mainly been on Alaska. While I get diverted a little bit when I find something interesting, I don't know the answer to that.
Because I feel like when I'm looking at that map, it seems kind of very like, focused on America and our hemisphere area. And I didn't really look at Asia on the map, and I'm so curious, yeah, like, what if they jump over from that side to over here? See? Oh yeah, the green, okay. Over there.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think that was that my timer?
No, that was me.
Oh, no, that's okay. I'm happy to keep going if there are more questions.
One, hopefully it's a quickish question. For the, as we're looking at the map here, like, say, Southern Australia or Africa, is there been any successful eradication, or what kind of techniques are they using? Is there, for the spots where there is now an introduced invasive range?
There's a really good example in, I'm not gonna be able to tell you, in California. And, it's a slough. Oh, Elkhorn? It's not Elkhorn. Further north.
Oh, we got it.
Yeah, that's on the outer
Probably would
coast.
know, yeah.
Yeah. It's further north. Anyway, they trapped it for years. Trapped, and they were pretty sure they got them all.
Cool, yeah,
Good job. And then, 2 years later, they had an explosion. And it was because they trapped out all the larger crabs that were putting pressure on the juveniles. And so they took out all but those smaller crabs, and then they had a huge explosion. So, yeah, Hydra effect. So, the idea, based on that example, the thinking is that you can't actually eradicate them unless you're, on the edge. This is where my present thinking is if we're on the edge of suitability, if we put a lot of pressure on them, maybe we can get rid of them. And because possibly their distribution is limited, that's not going to keep larvae from coming up,
but yeah, if it's, that's the most vulnerable stage, I would think.
Yes,
If the life cycle
for
anyway,
sure.
so if it's already not good conditions, we might kind of keep that down anyway.
Yeah, and so these black dots, which I didn't mention, these are all areas where, that guy, I don't know what's going on over there, but, this is, oh yeah, probably. This is where they've had, an introduction that failed. So you were talking about Mexico. So this is, that's really warm water there.
The Gulf is like at 80 degrees most of the summer.
Is Tasmania really as infested as it looks like? Man.
Potential, green is potential.
Oh.
But this, yeah, this southern Australia, yes.
So actual is purple?
This is native, where they, have a long history and ecosystems that keep them in check, organisms that are not overly impacted by them. Red is where they've been introduced and are succeeding and spreading. And then green is where they're projected to be able to colonize. Right, so this is going back to your question, like why this side but not this side?
Yeah, well, I know that red spot, there's a big city over there, right?
Yeah, so whether it's ballast water discharge or live food.
It's not just about the latitude where, the ocean currents really push warm and cold water around. And so,
Here?
right, and so, we were wondering why one side and not the other is suitable. But, it might be that warm water can push down the coast there, keeping that whole side really inhospitable, right?
Yeah, thank you, Barbara.
Yeah.
The current goes like that. And then I see up in the East Coast, I haven't heard of them being in Maryland either.
I don't think they're that far south.
And there's a huge population of blue crab, and I'm just wondering if the blue crab are able to keep them out, because the blue crab are pretty aggressive. Like the dungeons here are much bigger, but they're nowhere near as aggressive as the blue crab.
I know there's concern about impacts to blue crab.
No questions online, any other questions for Tammy Davis? Shall we thank her? Thank you so much. This is very. And you have handouts.
Yeah, there's some stuff over on the table there, and like I said, I do have posters